Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a fabulous webinar presented by CTC. As usual, I am your host, Don Raz Rasmussen, the Senior MEP Applications Engineer here at CTC. Today we're going to talk about PID in Revit. This is some new functionality that we got in 2018, and I've been really playing with it and testing it out, and I'm actually really a fan, guys. It works really well, relatively seamlessly. There are some drawbacks that we'll get into, but like I mentioned earlier, a big fan of the new workflow and how we can use it to transfer some data from all the times we've done PIDs and get that into Revit so we don't have to drop off the data. So let's go ahead here and get started. As I see people are still kind of pouring in here, I will go through a little bit of the PowerPoint presentation here initially. And this little bit of a PowerPoint presentation is just kind of to lay out some steps and kind of what we're going to talk about moving forward with the webinar. Full disclosure, guys, I'm going to try to do all of this live while on a webinar. So let's see how this works. If it doesn't, I've got a secondary data set of everything inserted, but I wanted to show you guys the full process from I have something in PID and I want to get that into Revit. And so it's going to be a little risky here trying to use internet connections, but we'll see what happens. So moving on. I guess with a second click, there we go. Okay. So you want to use your PID in Revit, right? These are some things that we are going to have to understand about PID. If you haven't used PID before, I did a previous webinar on kind of like a baseline introduction to PID. Didn't get very far into it, the actual picks and clicks of creating a PID, but we got the basics down. But a lot of that had to do with project setup and where to find PID. And if you guys have never set up a PID or Plant 3D project before, I definitely suggest looking into that. And the biggest thing you need to know about PID is that there is no standalone Autodesk application named AutoCAD PID. The PID application is a workspace change inside of Plant 3D. So if you're looking for your Autodesk PID in your AEC suite, it's located inside of Plant 3D, and then you would simply change the workspace in the lower right-hand corner to be PID and either PIP, ISA, ISO, ISO, ISA. So you have a couple different standards there you can pick from. Another thing that's important is that in order for this process to work, in order to get your PID into Revit, you have to have a BIM 360 team account. You have to either have one personally set up or you have to have one set up through your business, because this process does work through the BIM 360 hub. It is a cloud-based process, and we have to be cognizant of that and make sure we have the setup done properly. What's nice about it being a cloud shared project is that you can gain access to a multitude of different platforms. And of course, we'll be getting into the BIM 360 team application a little bit here, show you the process that it works through as it goes through BIM 360 team and into Revit. But where you would go inside of the PID environment would be the PID collaboration tab, and then share project is the command. And again, I'll be walking through that here in just a moment. But I touched a little bit on the advantages of BIM 360 and the advantages of cloud-based applications. I've actually downloaded this on my tablet and my phone now, and I've been playing with this aspect of it. It's very useful. I'm able to mark up things on my cell phone and on my tablet and have those markups be sent directly to my computer. I get notifications, and I can go in there and I can make changes. It's a pretty seamless workflow, and I definitely encourage everybody to kind of take a look at some of the other things that having a BIM 360 account will give you, not just necessarily your PID and Revit functionality, but it seems to be the way that everything is trending right now. Obviously, cloud usage, being able to use things on mobile devices, so we seamlessly have data connection and interaction amongst team members. But the PID in the Revit environment, some things that we can expect once we finally get it in there. Inside of the Revit environment, obviously, to open the BIM 360 team PID in Revit, you would have to go to your Systems tab and open up the PID modeler, and we'll be going through that workflow and showing you how that works. Then we're also going to talk about some of the settings. They're under the Systems tab, under the PID Collaborator. The settings are going to be the really important parts that we have set up and mapped. And then of course the tool palette in Revit. PNID, when it's brought into Revit, creates a tool palette that we can use to pull line information from. And so now that we're done kind of talking about what we're going to learn, let's go ahead and get started. We'll jump right in right now, and we'll go start with AutoCAD PNID first. And so here's an example of an AutoCAD PNID. This is simply just the sample project that I pulled out of the Plant 3D install. Plant 3D install is super nice, comes with a complete sample project that has a Plant 3D models that are tied to the PNIDs, and that is also obviously done correctly so that things like your data manager work, and you can really get a taste of what Plant 3D can do when it's set up properly and executed properly. So I definitely encourage you guys to kind of open up the sample project, and obviously you can call us, set up a time that we can have a conversation around what we can do with PNID and Plant 3D if you need some initial guidance right away. I'm just going to go ahead, guys. I'm going to see if I can close that so we don't get another one of them flags. Okay, so collaboration tab on a completed PNID project. Now this is one of the frustrating parts I've found so far, is that you have to open a drawing, open a project, and open a drawing to get access to this tab. But as soon as you hit share project, of course the first thing it's going to say is, would you like to get started? You say yes. The next thing it says, you have to close this drawing and save it in order to continue. So I'll go ahead and close it now. And if you guys haven't noticed, I should have pointed this out initially, my apologies, is that of course up here I am signed in under my name. I'm signed in Revit as well, so it knows which BIM 360 team account to go to. Of course, in BIM 360 team account, I can pick my specific account right here, and I'm going to upload this project to the demo project here. Actually, you know what, I'll put it in, let's keep it in demo. So we're uploading the project to BIM 360. It's using a combination of obviously the PNID, but also the data manager inside of Plant 3D to push up all this information. Now, everything in PNID is very Revit centric, and by that I mean you can assign your own properties, which means you can assign your own data to specific parts and pieces inside of PNID. You can then take advantage of all that data inside the Revit environment, which makes this workflow extremely powerful and gives you the ability to not only not have to do double data entry, but to have a link between the PNID and the model so that your current PNID is also reflected as a current model and vice versa, which are really important to a lot of industries out there, oil, gas, chemical, food, drug. To my knowledge, I'll have to have at least current PNIDs on file at all times. So we see this thing is almost done uploading here. Seems to be going pretty quick. One thing, if you guys can see on my screen here where it says it's loading the project XML right now, I'll just take a moment while this is loading to talk about that. The project XML is a really big part of PNID and Plant 3D. In essence, it's the director of all the information inside of that environment. And so that is something that if you get into PNID and Plant 3D, you're definitely going to want to get some knowledge on, is that project XML and how it works. Okay. So now I'm going to go ahead and close this, and we'll get into Revit. So I'll open up the Revit environment. So here in the Revit environment, under your Systems tab, if you've been in 2018, you've probably seen this button right here called PNID Modeler. Right below it is PNID Collaboration. Okay, and this, of course, 45-degree arrow here is a settings arrow, just like everything else inside of Revit, but we'll be coming back to that in a moment. Now that I've uploaded this to the BIM 360 hub, I can come over here and click Start Modeling. Now I want to point something out. This can be frustrating at times. If I am in the starting view, I cannot click Start Modeling. Okay, I have to be in a floor plan view in order to get this to work. Now, I'm sorry, wrong project, guys. That was the one in case that things didn't work out the right way. Let's go to that one right there. Okay. Now that I'm in a floor plan, I can hit this Start Modeling button. You guys see it's active there. And of course, there's a Learn More about this process right here, which if I don't answer all your questions in this 30-minute webinar, you can definitely peruse that area of the knowledge network. So I'll click on Start Modeling here. course, it will communicate with BIM 360, and I'll be able to pull down my projects. So come into Don Rasmussen here, and I'll go into my demo projects, and there is the sample project that I put up that I can access. So I'll just simply at this point say open project. It's going to pull the PNIDs down and make them available in my tool palette here that you see on the right. Now I have my tool palette currently tab docked with my project browser, just so you guys understand how I've got this situated. Of course, down here in the bottom you've got the ability for different views, ways you would like to see your different lists of PNIDs depending upon how many you have. You have nice search functionality up here for very confusing jobs that have lots of PNIDs. But in order to get started modeling PNIDs now, it's just as simple as clicking on this PNID that I want to start with, hitting next, and then that PNID will show up here along with the line lists, the numbers of lines, or line lists rather, excuse me, that were inside of this PNID. Now I can navigate inside this PNID just like I would in a normal Revit environment. So pushing on my mouse wheel, I have pan, I have zoom in and out. Okay, so I can explore this PNID inside of the Revit environment. Of course, when I come down here and I click on specific lines, that line is then highlighted in the PNID to let me know which line it is that I'm going to draw inside of the Revit environment. Now, before I can start drawing, I really should do some mapping. And that's of course going to be under the settings. And so let's take a moment and look at those settings and what we can do and also what we can't do. So I want to give you a full picture here of everything that's available. And so I hit my settings button here, this little arrow, and there's three settings, levels of settings really. There's system type settings, there's object mapping, and then there's property mapping. In the system type settings, what we're able to do here is grab the PNID service numbers. So in PNID, these are the out-of-the-box services that come with. Now I can create as many services in PNID as I want. I can call them out however I would like. But inside of the Revit environment, what we would do then is create pipe system types that are based upon the PNID service types coming out. And so I could sit here and start mapping these things together. So here's my entire list of all the different piping systems that I have inside of my starter project here that I'm looking at. I'm actually using the MPP starter project right now. And so just for the sake of argument, we'll go ahead and say atmospheric vent is going to be tied to dry sprinkler. Okay. We are going to, say things like, let's see here, process water, I believe is what's underneath here. Process water can be tied to domestic cold water. Okay. And so the idea is that you would finish some of this mapping. General process, I'm going to go ahead and tie to something because I believe that's most of the lines inside of this PNID are general process. So I'm just going to simply tie that to steam for now. Okay. Of course, here you've got your add and remove functionality. We can add additional lines of information. Okay. Now it's important to understand that if we add lines here, guys, this does not, I repeat, does not read back to the PNID and create this in the PNID environment at a root level. This is a Revit environment change only. If you want these things fixed at a root level, these need to be created inside the PNID environment, and then this process needs to be redone. You need to re-export up to BIM 360 and pull it back down in order for those changes to be found. It's not necessarily a reciprocal relationship. So that's an important part to pay attention to in the process. Now that we've talked a little bit about systems and types, let's go on to object mapping. Now with object mapping, I'm able to take my pipes, my pipe accessories, and my equipment. You see there's all three separate tabs here, and map them to specific things. So primary line segment is the main line segment that's going to be used in PNID, at least in this one, and I can actually tie that to one of my pipe types. So this is going to be really important if you're going to use this functionality that you have Revit set up properly. You have your pipe types made properly and your pipe systems made properly. If you made your pipe systems as at least partially defined as pipe types, this workflow is not going to work as good as if you had your pipe type set up as materials and your pipe system set up as the items that those pipe materials are carrying. And so I'm just going to simply put this on PVC right now, and I'm going to go ahead and just do some other ones here very quickly. Copper here, and we're just changing some stuff up so we can see the differences between them. I'll go with steel butt weld on that one. So that would be the actual pipes and the pipe materials themselves. If we move on to pipe accessories. Pipe accessories, you also get some other commands right over here on the right hand side. You get the ability to look at your hand valves, control valves here. Obviously there's some automatic mapping going on here that I have not done, and what the PNID has done for me is that if everything is named with accordance names, ball valve, valve ball, it can put that together for me, and so I don't have to do this hand mapping. Same thing with my butterfly valve, my check valve, and my motorized control valve. That was all automatically done throughout this transfer. Then of course over here you've got pipe fittings. I can map pipe fittings together. The flange and the backflow preventer, that didn't really work too well for me because it's just simply got the word flange in it as a connection type. But you guys kind of get the idea. I can take specific things and tie them to specific families. Right? So if I take that cap and say, for example, if I tie it to a clean out for now, which we would never do, but just to show you guys the functionality and how that actually works. So after you've done some of this mapping, and then I should talk a little bit about some of this mapping too as we move on here to piping specialty items. This mapping, guys, is project specific. So if I have a starter project with the PNID already linked in, I've done all this mapping, that information tends to stay with the project, with the Revit starter project. If I am doing this workflow from the ground up and I don't have a starter project that I'm using, I will more than likely, it hasn't worked seamlessly, guys. It's been hit and miss for me, to be completely honest. But more than likely what you're going to have to do is, if you do this from the root level, is you're going to have to set up this mapping every time. Of course, as you see here, creating and or naming Revit families to mirror your PNID families will help this mapping process be as automatic as possible. And then, of course, we're getting into equipment. Now, things like tanks, for example. I can find there's a dome roof tank. I'm going to tie that out to, say, for example, an expansion tank right now. And I would just keep putting these things together in terms of which mappings I want to put together. So if I look at, say, for example, some pumps too, equipment, e-motor equipment transferred there. It's always a kick for me to see what automatically transfers. Looking for my pump. And pumps, we'll just deal with that there. And we're going to tie this to the circulating pump, the small one I got, just so you guys get an understanding of it. All right, so we've successfully at least pretended to do some mapping here, both in system types, object mapping. We've covered the pipes, the pipe accessories, and the equipment. So you can see, guys, here this mapping is pretty extensive. These are the portions that I really like about what we're doing here, obviously combined with the tool palette over here that helps you track things that we're going to get into. But I'm really a big fan of these first two in terms of how far they went with the setup. Now when we get into property mapping, this is where I kind of had a little bit of a disappointment because I'm only able to map the tag properties out to specific properties inside of my Revit environment. And so identity mark is my choice on these guys, but I would really like to see from Autodesk a little bit more functionality here. I would like to be able to introduce my own data inside the PNID environment, be able to map that to my own data in the Revit environment, so I have true seamless transfer. However, there is a lot of stuff, guys, that happens in the background here that you also don't necessarily have to set up. And so I'm going to move forward with showing you some of that functionality here. Probably got about 10 minutes left, so over the next 10 minutes, we're going to play with some of this and get into it. So I'm going to click OK here. And coming back to this tool palette now. If we're back at this tool palette, if I take this line 1038 here, I'm just going to simply click on that. I'll hit Next. And now when I click on that 1038, obviously that line is highlighted, but now it's highlighting all the process and parts of that line. So this line starts at this tank, okay? and it ends at this pump. PNID is intelligent enough to know that. And so what's nice is that I can grab parts and pieces from here. I was right, I mapped the dome. I'm sorry, guys. Let me go back and map the cone roof tank, because that just seems to make more sense. I'm going to map that to my expansion tank still. Okay. So you see that mapping done there. If I grab this guy and there's my expansion tank, I can simply place that item. Okay. Now when I place that item, oh, excuse me here. Still making work sets mistakes, guys. After 12 years in Revit, or actually a little bit more than that, still making work set mistakes. So we'll go ahead and fix that right there. All right. So when I placed that tank, you guys, if you notice, there was a green line that showed up right here. Okay. The green line here means it's tracking as you're placing items, and so this item has been placed. It's verified. It works with the data as given. And so when I click on this specific tank, we're able to see as I come down here that the identity mark that I mapped to the tag is reporting a TK1004, and here's the TK1004 right here. So now as I want to draw a line segment, I can come and I can grab this line segment here. Now this line segment, of course, is mapped to a specific system and a specific type of pipe. So you can see it's pulling that information right here already. So here's the pipe type that it's mapped to. Here's the steam system that the P right here, you see this P. This is general process. This general process I mapped to steam, so that's where it's pulling that information from. It's reading my mapping. And then, of course, regular old Revit applies. So my elevation for the pipe, my size of the pipe here and here, so I can set different things. Of course, it's pulling size information from here as well. See this, 4-inch, 4-inch. And so I can just simply draw this pipe. And as I draw this pipe, you'll see that this pipe is being checked off here every place that there's pipe. Okay, every place that there's a 4-inch. Now if I were to change and draw a 3-inch, obviously this concentric reducer I did not map. It might be interesting to see what it's pulling. Yep, it didn't pull anything. So I'll just draw this CS3 or this 3-inch for the CS300 in the same system here, and I'll make that connection. Revit will obviously take over, putting in a reducer and an elbow there for me, but then you see the 3-inch line has been checked off. Now this remaining 4-inch segment, which is, of course, if I hover over this here, I get to see which segment exactly I'm drawing, can be continued. So if I draw that 4-inch here, obviously Revit takes over, but then you'll see it check off the rest of the 4-inch. Okay. Of course, your mains and your branches are done differently inside of PNID because we assign line numbers differently for a branch. Of course, this gets into PNID functionality, how we can tie things together in groups and have them all have the same name. But let's go ahead and I'm going to scroll back up here to the top, and I'm going to finish placing some things. So I'm going to escape here, and I wonder if the hand valve, I did not map him either. So excuse me, guys, I won't be able to place the hand valve without mapping that together. But I'll go ahead and place this pump. I did map that. So if I place this pump here, see that pump is checked off. Now if I come back to these lines a little bit and let's explore some of the data that's inside of these lines. We saw that it automatically transferred, obviously, because the mappings that we did, the size, the system, and the type. But as we scroll down here, I want you to kind of see how the line number doesn't show up in here as a piece of data, right? Which is one of the things that I would obviously like, because we want to be obviously tagging some of that line number information inside of Revit. Good news is, guys, is that even with this workflow where it is now on the data side, we can use third-party tools like Spreadsheet Link to expand on this process and get data from our PNIDs into Revit in that environment relatively seamlessly, albeit not as seamlessly as if there was a third-party tool kind of built for it. So I'll point out some more things here about the PNID modeler user interface. Inside of the 1038 line, you see this little circle right here. This is keeping track of your overall progress. So as I place things, this circle has been turning blue to indicate that my level of completion with drawing this line. If I hit my 3 dots over here, I get to go back to my line list. Okay, my line list is the entirety of obviously what's here. Now I can skip in between lines at any point to draw them. Of course, I just have to hit next, moves me to that line, and then the assets on said line right here. And then of course it's just like a tool palette, it's drag and drop functionality. Now of course the home button takes you back out to your different PNID lists. I can move to my other PNID if I wanted to at this point and grab information off of this. Now you might be wondering, when I go back home, why does one look like it's exporting in model space and one looks like it's exporting in paper space? That's happening because of the setup I have in PNID. So if I'm in the model space of a particular drawing, when I choose to export it, I will get a model space review window. If I'm in the paper space, I will get a paper space review window. So that's just simply where your views are when you export out of PNID and go into BIM 360. And then if I go along some of these lines, I'm going to go ahead and pick one that doesn't have a question mark after it. When I finish placing all these, of course, I will get all green across here. That would indicate that I am done. But if I take a moment and go back to my first PNID and some of the lines that I placed here, oh, that one, right, 1038 was some of the lines that I placed. Sometimes what you will get, let's see if I can't force it into it here. I'm going to delete that 3-inch line. As I come down here, you see the 3-inch line goes away from being green and back to being gray, indicating that that hasn't been placed. But also at times when there is a discrepancy between what it understands as information from PNID and what it understands as information from Revit don't match, you will get a different color in that green area. And I'm going to see if I can't force it into this here by doing that. And yes, I can. So here you see that you have green and yellow kind of as a cautionary tale. As I hover over that, the Revit part does not match. So it's not seeing a match in between the tank number here and the tank number I just manually entered in the Revit environment, because I entered TK1005 and it's supposed to be TK1004. As I go back and make that change because of the mistake I made, apply that correction, you see that yellow stripe go away. That is part of the workflow for all the parts and pieces inside of this tool palette. So of course, obviously, your PNID has to be set up properly and correctly in order for this to fully transfer all the information from PNID into the Revit environment. All right, guys. Well, that just about wraps it up there. Thank you for attending. I will be going around and teaching this workflow more often to anybody who will listen. I think there's a lot of value here. And even in areas where we didn't traditionally go through the process of making PNIDs, everything starts with a PNID, but oftentimes it's abandoned after we understand the theoretical concept and we're moving to actual design. This is something that I hope makes use of some of those early stages of schematic design when we're figuring out what a process might look like.